today's webinar. The topic of this webinar is Tools for Building More Resilient Communities with Solar+Storage. This webinar is a presentation of Clean Energy Group's Resilient Power Project, and we have two staff members from Clean Energy Group here with us today, Seth Mullendore, who is a project director, and Rob Sanders, who is our senior finance director. Before I pass it over to them to begin our presentation, I'd like to go over a few quick housekeeping notes. All of our participants for this webinar are in listen-only mode. You have a couple of options to join the audio portion of this webinar. You can either call in using a telephone, or you can connect using your computer mic and speakers. Very important note, we ask that you please submit your questions as you think of them by typing them into the question box on your webinar console and hitting send. We will be reading through your questions as they come in, and we will save plenty of time for questions with the audience at the end of our presentation. So please do type your question, and when you think of it, don't wait until the very end. A final note, this webinar is being recorded. You will find a recording of this webinar, as well as all of our previous webinars, on the Resilient Power Project website at resilient-power.org. So with that, I will pass it over to our first presenter, Seth Mullendore. Seth is a project director here at Clean Energy Group.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Sam, and thanks to everybody for joining us today. I wanted to give you just a brief introduction about who we are here at Clean Energy Group and the Resilient Power Project before going into more detail, because really today's topic is about the Resilient Power Project and the tools that we can help with, the tools that are out there for developing a Resilient Power Project, and background about what really Resilient Power is and how it can help your community. So Clean Energy Group is a national nonprofit. It's been around for about 20 years and really works in all areas of clean energy, with a big focus recently has been on solar and storage through our Resilient Power Project. We have a sister organization that's called the Clean Energy States Alliance, which is another national organization that is a member organization of clean energy fund managers at the state level. So this is a lot of state energies that manage things like system benefit charges for clean energy and efficiency programs. The Resilient Power Project has now been going for about 3 years, going into 4 years, and that's a joint project with Meridian Institute and completely funded by foundation support. You see a list of our foundations here. And as Sam mentioned, we have a lot of our information online. So I just want to say, so obviously our today's speakers are myself. I'm project director here at Clean Energy Group, and also we have our senior Rob Sanders, who will be speaking after my presentation. We're going to be trying a couple of new things today, so hopefully it will all go well, but we are experimenting with some new things, so bear with us if anything does go off track. Just a brief introduction. Okay, what is resilient power? Resilient power, the way we define it, is the ability to not only provide critical power to essential facilities during a power outage, but also to provide economic benefits throughout the year. That's why we look at solar and storage as providing a number of services above and beyond something that, say, a backup generator, a diesel generator would provide, which is just available during a power outage and doesn't really provide any services throughout the year. As a bit of background, the Resilient Power Project came in the wake of a lot of adverse weather activity, specifically Superstorm Sandy, and the fact that so many people were left stranded without power. Our project focuses specifically on low-income communities and disadvantaged communities, really two buckets of affordable housing as well as critical community facilities, whether that's emergency shelters or first responders or healthcare facilities. So now I'd like to put up a poll for you. This is something that we're trying new today, just to see what ground on resilient power technology. So it will take a couple of minutes, or not a couple of minutes, but just take a minute here. Please rate your familiarity with Resilient Power Projects. I will a few seconds for some people to vote. Those of us who have been on our other and have known about the Resilient Power Project, a lot of this today may be a bit of review, but we're hoping to have some new stuff for people as well. Okay, looks like we have a fairly decent amount of people that have voted. We're up to about 80%. So let me close the poll and show you. So looks like we have pretty medium range of understanding. A lot of people would like a refresher, which is great because that's what we're here to do today. Those of you that have a good understanding on the topic, we hope to also present some new materials that maybe you aren't that familiar with. So, I want to give you again just a little background on the project and why it exists. So, really the thing we saw happening, like I said, was Superstorm Sandy on one side, and the fact that clean energy technologies, new technologies, were advancing and becoming less expensive on the West Coast. Are we seeing the next slide? It's not advancing for me here. Yep. It looks like it jumped ahead. Okay. Well, so the real problem that we were trying to solve is that resilient power projects were causing harm, specifically to low-income communities, elderly, disadvantaged. We saw this in Hurricane Sandy, where there was over 100 fatalities, bunches of property damage, and those hardest hits were those in low-income areas. For example, in Red Hook and Brooklyn, 4,000 of 6,000 residents in the largest housing project had no heat or water for over a week after the storm, and that's just not acceptable. These are the folks that can least afford to relocate and recover when there is this kind of disaster. So what we're trying to address through the Resilient Power Project is trying to bridge this equity divide. So on one hand, there are the higher end markets where there are lots of solar and storage projects being built. There are thousands of projects that are out there. They're mainly being deployed for economic reasons, to reduce electric bills. The solar reduces the consumption charges that buildings have, whereas the storage reduces demand charges, which is another big charge that commercial customers have. So storage is likely to grow a lot. And we want to make sure that low-income markets also receive the same benefits that these higher-end markets are getting. The problem is that so far few projects have been built that benefit low-income communities, even though there's a greater need for the technology, particularly the reduction of energy costs, lowering the energy burden that disproportionately impacts lower-income communities, as well as the resiliency benefits that, as I said before, these folks do not have as many resources to relocate or find different ways to get through and survive during a major outage. The low-income markets face financial difficulties that other areas don't have. It's more difficult to finance these just based on a number of project economics. And there are fewer strategies that are really designed to get these technologies deployed in these communities. So what we're trying to do, like I said, is bridge this power divide. We're trying to make sure that folks that are impacted, particularly in low-income communities, have the resources that folks like Elon Musk are talking about, and scaling to a wide scale. All the projections for energy storage see that this is going to be a market that expands exponentially over the coming years, and we want to make sure that we don't repeat some of the things that we've seen in solar, where low-income, disadvantaged communities are less likely to get the benefits of these systems until many years that they've reached higher-end markets. So, as I said, our focus is on two areas, the affordable housing and critical facilities. These are pictures of some of our featured projects, projects that we've worked with or we highlight as the kind of resilient power projects that we're trying to get deployed across the country. And we'll go into these a little bit later in more detail. So with that, I'd like to open up one more poll to get a gauge of what folks would really like to hear about during this webinar. So really, you can check off a couple of boxes if you want to hear about a couple of things, but I want to hear about what you're most interested in learning about in the webinar. So folks can start to answer. Looks like some answers are coming in, and give it a couple more seconds here. All right, looks like we got a good bunch of votes in, so I'm going to close it down. And it looks like we're really across the board. So if people want to hear about everything and really the economics and financing edge everything else out, but across the board, people are interested, which is great because this is everything that we're going to cover today. Figured I'd throw the poll up to see if anything outweighed other parts by a lot, that we would really dedicate more time to it. But since it's across the board, we'll just go ahead and talk about everything that we were planning to talk about. Okay, so at this point, I am going to switch over and walk you through the website itself to show you our new offering, which is the Resilient Power Toolkits, which is available on our website. So you can get to the Resilient Power Toolkits in a couple of different ways. This is our main Clean Energy Group website, and we have all of our projects listed here. This is the Resilient Power Project. You can also go directly to the Resilient Power page, as Sam said, through resilient-power.org. It will take you directly here. So we have a number of different resources. Today we're going to be focusing on added with our and up the screen that I showed. We have two different toolkits. One is focused more on community services. The other is focused more on the affordable housing sector. Really, a lot of the resources are the same throughout both of the toolkits, but there are some that are specific to one or the other. So it's worth looking at both, but if you have more your community-based and looking at things like emergency shelters and fire stations, go to the community services. If you're looking at affordable housing, then obviously go to the housing. Now I'm going to start walking you through. I'm actually going to go to the affordable housing because that has a few more of the resources that I'm going to go over today. So within the toolkits, there are a number of different types of resources, and these are categorized into a few different category areas. Right now, we have a lot of reports. Some of them are ones that we've produced here at Clean Energy Group through the Resilient Power Project or through Clean Energy States Alliance. We also have guides, a number of webinars, like this one will be added to the list once it's done and recorded, and a number of other types of resources. Not just stuff that we've put out either. We also have, if you go down to the bottom of the list, we have a number of additional resources, and these are our other partner organizations that we've worked with in other projects that have a very, very close focus on resilient power and solar and storage. So I urge you to check those out as well. I want to mention a couple of things that aren't here yet that will be coming later on this year. We intend to add some tools here as well so that people that are developing a resilient power project can properly size solar and storage systems for the needs that they have, whether that's resiliency or economic. One of these we're working with the National Renewable Energy Lab, and we're hoping that that will be out in public later this year, probably towards the end of the year. In the meantime, there's a company we worked with, Jelly, that we'll be announcing a partnership with them in just about a month or two. So more to come on those and more tools that we'll be adding to this. And this will be morphing and evolving throughout time. One thing that we really want to hear from is what you need that's not here or what you could use more of. So please let us know what you would like to know about that's not on these toolkits. But we have 6 different focus areas. One is just a background on technologies. The other is economics, then financing, developing a resilient power project, policies, and like I said, we have those additional resources, which we aren't going to get too much into those today, but some resources from those groups are within these different categories that we have here. So I'm going to walk you through a few of these to start things off and just show you the tools that are available and out there for developing a resilient power project. So for each of these category areas, we've highlighted a couple of key resources that if you don't look at anything else, we think these are the top ones you should look at. And then we have a list of multiple other resources within each group. So background in technologies, for those of you that aren't very familiar with solar and storage and how they work together, that's probably for most people, that's going to be more on the storage side. A lot of people are familiar with solar these days. So one product that we developed here is the Solar and Storage 101, which is really a background document with them in a resource system. So Not going to rely completely on the internet here because it can be a little bit slow. This is a look at the document. Some of the things that we have in there are just some very simplified schematics that can show you how these systems work. For instance, here is a AC coupled solar and storage system. If you don't know what AC coupled is versus DC coupled, I urge you to read the document. It will go through some of the differences and what those different systems look like and why they exist and what are the advantages and disadvantages of these. It's not meant to be a deep technical document, just meant to be a very kind of high-level overview of what the technologies are and how they can help you. So also in this is a guide that was developed by the City University of New York, the Sustainable CUNY project. This talks about retrofitting an existing solar system with energy storage and what steps need to be taken for that process. So again, they have several schematics about what systems look like, and it goes more into detail about what kind of things you need to take account of when you are doing a retrofit project. So it lists some specifics as far as what to consider when retrofitting. Also, it talks about what you need to consider if you're building a solar system, but you want to think about adding a storage system later on. So for example, implementing either an AC or DC coupled system, these are some of the steps that need to be taken when doing a retrofit for a resilient power project on an existing solar system. I'm going to go back to the toolkits now. And moving on from the technologies, we're going to get more into the economics. So when I'm talking about economics, this is really looking at how much the batteries cost and, well, how much the solar and storage cost, but really the focus is on batteries, again, because it's a lesser known technology at this point, and there's less information out there that people are aware of. And what are the value streams? One of the good reports that I highly recommend for the value streams is a report by the Rocky Mountain Institute. This was put out a little while ago. It's the economics of battery energy storage. So this is a really great document. It really covers all of the potential value streams that an energy storage system can have and where that value is really located. So this is a graph I always like. And basically, it shows that this outer ring, things that are located behind the meters that we're talking about, residential systems or commercial systems, you can unlock all of these different values. Whereas if you go down the list, you go to transmission level, so kind of utility or distribution level, and then transmission level, there are less services that are unlocked and less potential value streams. Unfortunately, not all of these can be tapped into at this point. There's a lot of talk about batteries and value stacking different values in order to achieve better economics with energy storage systems. But at this time, you can't unlock all of those, and that's one of the barriers, really, to developing these projects at this time. So along with that, we get into some of the different value streams in more detail. So this is another report that we put out here at Clean Energy Group. It's looking at electricity markets. It's an area that a lot of people are not that familiar with. So it gets into things like demand response and frequency regulation. A little bit more complicated than some of the behind-the-meter value streams that people know about. Let me jump to a page here. Let's look in here at the some of the kind of general values of storage, and then this table too goes into all the different potential value streams that we've identified, and there are even others that others have identified. That gives people a basic overview of these are the types of services that energy storage potentially can provide, and the types of values that you can tap into. So this electricity markets report is really for people that would like to know more about these kind of higher level and more advanced value streams for energy storage that you could potentially tap into. Then I'm going to get into a couple of other resources that those of you that know the Resilient Power Project and have been following us for a long time, this is really where a lot of the focus of our analysis work has come about. But we put out two different reports on the specific analysis of affordable housing. And resilient solar and storage projects in affordable housing. The first of these was Resilience for Free, which looked at 3 different markets. It looked at Chicago, New York City, and Washington, D.C., and looked at what the economics of adding solar to a project was and the economics of adding solar and storage. So as an example, this is a project we're looking at in Chicago, and we worked with actual storage developers and energy service providers to get data for these and to look at what a real economic scenario would look like. It's kind of at a high level, the results of these. So in Chicago, for example, a solar system has a pretty poor payback for an affordable housing project. We're talking about over 20 years. It's just not very economic. If you're able to add a battery system to this, the New York is in what we call the PJM territory, where it can participate in frequency regulations. So this is one of those grid services that we talked about in the energy storage markets paper. Adding a battery system, 100 kilowatts, you could reduce the payback, almost cut it in half here. And adding a bigger battery, you could cut that down almost in half again. And it goes into detail. The appendix of this goes into really a lot of details about what the year-over-year earnings are, the costs and savings that you could get and revenue potential through having a battery and solar system. We also took another look at the economics of affordable housing. This time we looked specifically at California, which we didn't cover in the Resilience for Free webinar. This report, Closing the Clean Energy Divide, really this came out of legislation in California that's looking to provide a great deal of funding for solar in affordable housing, for solar energy systems. And we were brought in by some of the environmental justice community and housing advocates to take a look and see if energy storage made sense to include in this program as a technology that would be eligible for benefits. What we found was that in some cases, the economic results for adding energy storage above just the solar alone system were really quite impressive and quite definitely worth the investment. We found that energy storage system could actually double the savings that you could achieve for about half the cost of a solar system, or even less than that. So our main takeaway from this was that energy storage should at least be considered when you're doing an incentive program for affordable housing in California for a solar program, because you can add such great benefits to the system. That's really for the commercial side of the system. We're going to be coming out with another report either late this month or early next month that looks at changes to some of the things that are going on in California. There are some changes going on to their net metering policies, as well as some proposed changes to when the peak periods, the highest price electricity periods, are under their time of use programs, and increases to demand charges, which is really one of the main value streams that energy storage can tap into, is reducing those demand charges. So we're going to be putting out a paper on that. It really shows some pretty amazing loss of value that's potentially going to happen for a solar system under these new rates and policies, and a lot of advantage for, again, an integrated system, adding energy storage to a solar system. I want to just say here, too, that this doesn't mean it makes a lot of sense in every market, but it is starting to make more and more sense in more markets. If you want to have a resilient system, one that's going to provide power when you have an outage, you have to have the storage there. A solar system just really isn't designed to do that. They're designed to shut down when the grid shuts down. You may be able to keep a plug load going, but as far as charging or keeping larger systems going, you have to have some sort of energy storage or some sort of additional power system. One more thing that I'd like to show in the economic side, and also I'd like to say, I know we're going through a lot of material here and just kind of giving a cursory high level. So anything that people would like to go into more, we have an hour and a half set aside for this webinar today. The presentation is not going to take nearly that much time, so we would really like a lot of engagement from you. Please submit your questions. I'll be looking through those as Rob gets into his discussion after I'm done here. And Rob and I are happy to hang out for the whole hour and a half and answer any questions that you have. May not take all that time, but we'll be here. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is this project qualification scorecard. This is actually one that if you want to get the resource, you have to just submit some details to get access to it. This is through a company, Jelly, that we worked with to do the analysis for the California project. They put together a really nice resource here that's this project qualification scorecard. Basically, what it goes through are all the different scenarios that you can have for a building, such as high energy charges, what the net metering looks like, incentives, high demand charges, and it's a simple scoring system, just a 0 or 1 for a project. And it can give you a score that tells you how well a project is suited for a solar and storage. So just a very simple takeaway to give you a really just high-level idea. Do I have something where the economics probably look good for an energy storage project? So really, really encourage you to check this out. It gives you an idea of what to look for and what is important in looking at the economics. Jelly, again, is a tool. They've developed a tool to do economic sizing of energy storage systems, and they're going to be doing a release of that, I believe, later this month. We'll keep everybody up to date on that and how we're going to be working with them and using that tool to help low-income communities better understand the economics of solar and storage for their facilities. All right. So that pretty much does it for my overview of the economic side of things. I'm actually going to jump down to policies because I'll get back to the developing a resilient power project as well. I know that's an area people are really interested in, but that will lead more into some of Rob's topics, and he's going to go over financing as well. So this policy side of thing, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on because this is kind of the higher level. The policy is meant to help inform people of the kinds of policies that can be used to make sure that solar and storage technologies do and can reach low-income communities. So what needs to be put into place so that these technologies become more accessible. Clean Energy States Alliance, our sister organization, just put out a really good overview for states and municipalities of the different mechanisms that can be used for encouraging solar and storage development in communities. It goes into a whole list of the different policy mechanisms and different kinds of incentives. So this section here, the policy tools, whether it's grants or rebates, mandates, tax incentives, there's just a whole list of different levers that you can pull to help incentivize these technologies, make them more accessible. And in all cases, we really encourage that there is specifically a focus on low-income communities. The market is different. It's more difficult to reach these communities. It's more difficult to get projects developed there. And when designing policies for technologies, you have to have, take account of special considerations to make sure that they reach all communities, not just the higher-end markets, not just commercial customers, but community centers, public health facilities, folks that could really use the benefits of these systems. With that, one other interesting area on the policy side. This, I don't have an actual resource that I'm going to show you. We did a webinar. There was a journal article on this, basically talking about improving air quality with energy storage and solar technologies as well. It's a real shift in how to look at these clean energy technologies. So not just driving down costs, not just driving down greenhouse gas emissions, but actually improving local air quality emissions and improving public health, which disproportionately impacts disadvantaged communities by deploying these technologies. So instead of relying on things like natural gas peaker plants, you can deploy energy storage combined with solar for a clean alternative to these high emissions facilities that disproportionately are located in low income and communities of color. So a very, very interesting study, a really good report. I encourage you to check out the webinar if you're interested in that kind of thing. And we have a bunch of other webinars. After I go through this, before I turn things over to Rob, I'm just going to show you a few of the other things that we have available as resources so you know where to find them on our website. So I'm going to go back now to talk a little bit about developing a resilient power project, and then that's going to lead into Rob's conversation. So One thing that we developed here is this solar and storage project checklist. This is a very kind of full document for people that aren't really familiar with solar and storage, what you need to look at. So it's just a few different steps, things that you should think about when starting to do a project. So for folks that aren't really that knowledgeable about solar and storage, getting to know your utility bill, looking for experts, and doing research on utility policies, reaching out to utilities, and finding out what needs to be done. Just a simple checklist of the steps that need to be taken when designing a project. Another tool that actually is within the community toolkit, not the housing toolkit, is something that was developed through another project that we're involved in, which is the Energy Storage Technology Advancement Partnership. This is a DOE-funded project that is in conjunction with Sandia National Labs. They're working with a number of different municipalities in Massachusetts for resilient solar and storage projects. They put together an energy storage procurement guidance document so that folks trying to develop a solar and storage project, a lot of people, again, are familiar with the solar side and how to put together a request for proposals for solar, but not so much for energy storage. So this has a couple of templates in it. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. It's a pretty extensive document, but for both the utility scale projects, so we're talking a megawatt, has it for that, as well as behind the meter projects, so ones that are actually located at facilities of all sizes. So this can be used by anyone. It's guidance for municipalities, but it really helps to be a guidance for anyone that's putting together an RFP for one of these projects. Puts together a lot of different information that you should ask companies about, things that you should request when getting back bids, and how to put all of that together. So very, very handy document. Another thing, and then I'm going to lead this into to showing you a little bit more about our website, is our featured installations. So this is another section within our website, not just through the toolkits, but we've identified a number of projects that we feel like are very good examples of what resilient power projects could look like and what you can do with solar and storage. We're constantly adding new projects to this, and we have it broken down by affordable housing, emergency shelters, critical services, and then really kind of the bigger community-wide projects. Just to give you an example, here's a project we did that we helped support that was in Minnesota at a nature center there, that they were retrofitting an old solar system that was starting to fail, and they wanted to look at energy storage both as an economic way to help achieve better cost for the nature center, to lower their demand charges, as well as resiliency. They experienced a big flood up here, and a good place for both the community to be able to, and for emergency services to have kind of a dispatch hub and keep connected. So now they have a small storage system that can keep the solar online, and it's been running now since about the beginning of the year, and we're starting to get some results back. So we'll be putting out some more information on this project, as well as a number of others. These are not all projects that we are involved with, but a number of them are. So I am going to turn things over to Rob in a minute here, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about how we can help people develop a project and then get into the financing as well. But I wanted to show you a couple of other things that we have up here. All of the things that we've developed are available through our publications. You have our most recent ones here, and you can also go to our library that has an extensive list of everything that we've done, not just the Resilient Power Project, but all of our projects. You can sort it by just Resilient Power Project or keywords or anything that you're looking for. So should be able to find anything that we've ever put out in here. We also have a list of our webinars, both our upcoming ones. This one's on here right now, happening at the moment, as well as our archives. We have a lot of webinars, and we did almost one a week last year, and I think we're on track to do about that again. So a lot there. Of course, we put out a number of blogs on this as well, and we have a couple of newsletters. We have a monthly one to tell you about what's going on in the Resilient Power Project. those specifically interested in the technology, we have a weekly news that tells you about what's going on in the world of solar and storage, not just resiliency, but the technologies in general. Another thing that we're currently revamping, but is still available right now, is in addition to our featured installations, we also have a project map that lists resilient solar and storage projects across the country. So you can go and look and get details about a number of different projects. We have about 100 of them in right now. I think by the fall we'll have this kind of revamped and up to date, but it's still a useful resource right now. And for people that just want to see all the projects that are out there, or maybe what's out there near you, you can look at this. So with that, if you're turn things over to continue the conversation. I also want to let you know, after the webinar is done today, we're going to be sending out a survey just to, we encourage you to go look at the toolkits in more detail and send us any feedback about what's not there that you'd like to see more about and how we can be more helpful in doing what we do. So, okay, I'm going to turn it over to Rob.
Thanks, Seth. Waiting to get the slide up. This first slide is going to be about our Technical Assistance Fund, a key resource. It's a key resource for us in developing, in helping the development of resilient power projects. And it's funded by our foundations. Our grants pay for third-party technical services to determine the project feasibility. So that's both technical feasibility and economic and financial feasibility. What we ask in exchange for the funds is sharing of the deal and financing docs, and 2 years of reporting of project performance, and that's simply an annual summary of what the systems actually did. Did it perform as expected, and sharing those results with us so that we know what's working, how it was set up, what's replicable, what are some of the issues. As far as guidelines for the Technical Assistance Fund, these funds are for projects that support critical building electric loads and essential services in low-income communities. So a typical grant under this program is about $5,000 to $7,500. Not a great deal of money, but enough to help with the scoping of a project, initial scoping of a project. And larger grants are considered on a case-by-case basis. There it goes. Okay. Through the technical assistance and other support that's provided by Clean Energy Group staff, we're now providing support for more than and we've mapped projects as if you want to take each project and system size was, if any. Also want to say a word about our outreach to community advocacy organizations. The first couple years of the Resilient Power Project have necessarily focused on project development, but we've come to realize that we need to do more to engage community advocates because of the importance of building an informed constituency for community resilient power and to create demand for projects and for better policies. Sam, I'm having trouble advancing this for some reason.
Rob, I can advance them for you if you like.
I appreciate it. Yeah, that's great. Next, please. So in addition to providing technical assistance grants to pay for third-party technical services, Technical Assistance Fund has also provided community leadership grants on a pilot basis. So those funds are available to support community-led programs in the areas of energy equity and environmental justice, and to develop resilient power awareness and implementation strategies in low-income communities. This has not been a, the way we approach this has been to not come in and say, well, this is how resilient power projects should be done in your neighborhood. This is not prescriptive in that way. It's to understand, first of all, which are the outstanding advocacy organizations involved in these areas of energy equity and environmental justice, understand their work, and to ask them to find ways that our grant can support their work, existing work, and develop implementation strategies where it makes sense for resilient power as part of their work. So these initial grants have gone to 7 organizations: SEHA, Green Lining Institute, Link Housing in California, but also POA in Boston and along the East Seaboard and Midwest area, and then also Sustainable Molokai in Hawaii and The Point, and We Act in New York City. Next, please. So another focus area of the toolkits has been is having community resilient power projects and how those can be financed. So how financing plays into this. Some of the financing mechanisms include third-party power purchase agreements, leases, development loans, tax-exempt and taxable bonds, commercial-based financing. So this is a screenshot that highlights some of the resources that can be accessed through the toolkits. Next slide, please. And then these are some of the finance reports and papers that we're highlighting here. I'll talk more about some of these as we go along. Next, please. So how are solar and storage projects being financed today? Utilities play a part in this through direct ownership or third-party ownership agreements for services, contract for services with third parties. Two examples of this are the Green Mountain Power Project that was on Seth highlighted a moment ago, the Stafford Hill Solar Farm project in Rutland, Vermont, which is a 4-megawatt battery storage project, 2.5 megawatts of solar that provides resilience to an emergency shelter in a local school. And also PSE&G in New Jersey doing a community emergency shelter in a high school cafeteria. There are also large energy service companies, such as these are large ESCOs like Schneider Electric, who are focused on municipal water and sewer treatment facilities or other mush market applications. We're also seeing solar companies and storage companies use venture capital and private equity, especially the early stage companies that are involved in that work, or are using project financing funds for that. Next slide, please. Now, just recently, there was an important announcement of a non-recourse project financing facility that's available through the efforts of Macquarie and CIT Bank, where they're going to finance 50 megawatts of behind-the-meter projects in California. It's the first non-recourse project financing facility for battery storage systems funded from the capital markets. There also, I can't underemphasize the importance of state incentives at this stage for community projects. For demonstration projects, Massachusetts, through their Department of Energy Resources, and Maryland's Energy Administration have done a good job in doing these game changer awards and other kinds of feature demonstration projects. Federal tax credits play a large role right now in improving the economics of these projects, both through the investment tax credits, which are available to storage, when the battery is charged from the solar PV system. And for affordable housing, using low-income housing tax credits, those can be piggybacked on the ITCs in some instances to fully fund these projects. And then bond financing for municipal projects and schools and large nonprofit institutions. This is traditional bond financing that can also do integrated clean energy solutions such as Solar+Storage. Next. So with all these financing mechanisms, why aren't more community solar and storage projects being built? Well, our funders wondered the same thing and asked what could be done to accelerate the deployment of Solar+Storage in low-income communities. And in May 2016, the Kresge Foundation, CERDNA Foundation, JPB Foundation commissioned the Clean Energy Group to conduct a capital scan, an overview of what kinds of grants and program-related investments and mission-related investments on the endowment side of the house, what kinds of grants represent investment opportunities in community resilient Solar+Storage. Next, please. Over 30 interviews were with market participants were conducted, and through that we identified 5 key barriers and more than 50 interventions to accelerate the deployment of Solar+Storage in low-income communities. And some of these include support for tax credit aggregation strategies, so that institutional investors can successfully consider placing tax equity into community facilities, or providing credit enhancement for investors, project developers to reduce performance financial risk, or to provide leadership grants, as I mentioned, to portfolio owners and community advocacy organizations to develop an informed constituency for community Solar+Storage projects. Next, please. One last thing I wanted to talk about. We will issue a new report later this spring that will describe a range of ownership and financing models for community solar and storage projects. The report describes how different ownership and finance models can result in more deployed projects with more of the economic benefits retained by low-income communities. The report is called Owning the Benefits of Solar+Storage, New Ownership and Investment Models for Affordable Housing. But many of the models are applicable to community facilities and other tax-exempt properties as well, not just affordable housing. So it looks beyond just immediate direct ownership of these systems to different kinds of third-party ownership arrangements that take advantage of the tax benefits, tax credits, and accelerated appreciation, and then flips ownership to the nonprofit or to an affiliated nonprofit entity. PACE, which is a variation of commercial PACE for non-taxable properties, involving third-party ownership is one of the models as well. And then utility contracted payment for service agreement structures. So that's an overview of some of the things we're doing on the finance side. I appreciate that. Thanks. Back to Seth.
All right, great. Thank you, Rob. So we are now open for questions. That's all the material we have prepared for today. Like I said, Rob and I are happy to hang around for the full hour and a half. We just have a few questions right now, so if anybody has any other ones, it looks like we're going to have plenty of time to get to questions, which is great. So, Sam, if you could, again, make it so that I'm able to share my screen. I think answering some of these questions will be easiest if I can kind of go around the website myself. Okay, great. Here we go. So, first question we have is asking about a municipality that owns their own electrical utility. So which resources would be best to show the benefits and considerations for that situation? So I do have a couple of recommendations for that. We have worked with some utilities, and specifically a municipal utility. In our featured installations here, we have a project that is the Sterling Municipal Substation. This is in Sterling, Massachusetts. This project, it was developed under a resiliency grant program that the state of Massachusetts had, but actually the economics of the project really stand up on its own. It's being tied to an existing solar system. This is a 2 megawatt battery, almost 4 megawatt hours, and it'll be supporting a police station that's nearby for resiliency purposes. But what the battery is doing for the municipality, for the municipal utility, actually cutting its payments for capacity and transmission payment to the ISO New England. So that's the basically the transmission operator for the region. We're going to be doing a webinar on that in a little bit, just later this month. Let me see if that's up here right now. On looking at more of the economics. There it is. So that's going to be on April 27th, the value proposition for energy storage at the Sterling Municipal Light Department. So in addition to that, I would say that because you're looking at a municipal utility, let me go back to the toolkits here. Actually, I would say going and doing I'll just pull up the resource myself. Doing the electricity markets report, I think, is probably a good one to show. I don't know where that went, but as I showed, the electricity markets that shows all the services that it can provide, as well as the RMI report that I was looking at that showed the different value streams for energy storage projects. Because as a municipal utility, you can really get into a lot of those, and these are all under the economics. So there's the economics of battery storage from RMI and the energy storage and electricity markets. So that would be my recommendations for that. Another question, just kind of generally, when I was talking about market opportunities, that solar and storage doesn't make sense in all markets, and was asking which markets this doesn't make sense in. It's not an easy question to answer. Partly, you can kind of look at the project map, and you can see where projects actually exist. It's a little hard to tell on the map here because of the way that it's organized, but basically a lot of the projects are focused on the coasts right now. This is partly because in the Northeast, actually the Mid-Atlantic, there is a revenue opportunity through participating in frequency regulation markets. That's again in the PJM territory that I mentioned, as well as high demand charges, which are in New York and Massachusetts and several of the New England states. California has a lot of support for energy storage and solar, and the way that the electricity rate structure is set up there, again, with high electricity and demand charges, systems tend to make a lot of sense there. But there are pockets that are popping up across the country. You can see it's really spread across different states. Not all of these are economic, but a lot of them do have some pretty good economics. Demand charges are really the place where energy storage is being developed across all areas for behind-the-meter cost reductions to lower the payments that commercial properties pay in demand charges. We're working with, again, the National Renewable Energy Lab to identify areas that have high demand charges, which really show the potential market opportunities for solar and storage systems. We hope to release that during the spring or summer at some point, probably more the summer at this point. Another question about things beyond lithium-ion batteries. Most of our analyses all of our analyses do look at lithium-ion batteries. Those are the most prevalent battery being deployed right now on the grid. That is something upwards of 90% of the storage capacity that's being put onto the grid at this point is lithium-ion, but it's not everything. Historically, lead-acid batteries have been a technology that's been a go-to, particularly for just pure resiliency projects. Lithium-ion batteries still tend to be a little bit lower priced, although lithium-ion's starting to be comparatively the same. The other thing that's really out there a lot is, or more often now, is flow batteries, which tend to be bigger projects to the utility scale, but they are better for longer duration applications. So if you're looking to provide power for over 4 hours at full power, flow batteries are starting to become a technology that more and more folks are looking at. We don't really get into a lot of that in our resources. The energy storage one, I can talk about lead-acid batteries some, but we don't really get into flow batteries at this point. We have some webinars on that, though, so If you want to learn more about flow batteries, take a look in our webinars and do a search, and you will find some webinars on the topic. Question about Technical Assistance Fund. Is it available for Canadian projects? Unfortunately, no. We are a national nonprofit just in the United States, so our Technical Assistance Fund does not go beyond the borders of the U.S. We're always very interested to hear about projects in other parts of the country, but we're not particularly funded to work outside of the United States. We are looking to get a bit more into international work, but at this time, that's really just been kind of preliminary work at this point. But we are hoping to expand a bit more. I don't know that we'll be providing technical assistance as far as direct support for Canadian projects, but we're always happy to talk to people. So if folks have questions, these technologies as far as how they work really work the same anywhere you put them. As far as how the markets work and how the utilities are structured, sometimes that's not the same in other countries. So we're not as our depth is not, our knowledge is not as deep on those topics. Rob, I have a question for you on the financing side. What does recourse financing mean? Maybe you can explain what that is and how it's used exactly.
Right. Recourse means that that the borrower is obligated to make payments. It could be secured or a guarantee, but obligation regardless of performing make that payment. It's unsecured transaction based upon just the economics of the entity that's operating. So it's simplified that way. The credit is more uniform in the sense that all the underlying transactions are non-recourse transactions, and it's a big growth. It's a big development for being able to use non-recourse project financing for energy storage transactions now. That the documents have been approved. This deal structures have been approved. People are comfortable with the technology and performance. And when I say people, I'm talking about capital market institutional investors.
Great. I've got some other questions for you, Rob, so I'm going to keep throwing them your way. Do you know of any municipal utility using on-bill financing?
Yeah, well, let's see. Municipal utilities. Not sure. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah. So maybe just for the folks that don't know much about that, can you talk about just how on-bill financing works?
Basically, it's a utility provide the utility bill as a means of making payments and does not provide the source of funding to finance a solar PV system or other energy measure. But it's the mechanism, the bill reporting to a lender who provides capital for those for that financing. So it's a people do pay their electric bills because the consequences are significant if you don't. So in general, there's a strong argument to say that on-bill payment increases the security for a lender to provide capital.
Great, that makes sense. Question from someone that works in the Washington State Low-Income Weatherization Program, which is funded by the Department of Energy and other federal and state sources. It says, although solar is allowed, the system costs generally exceed the allowable budgets. Is there an opportunity to partner with clean energy funds as leverage dollars to enable solar and storage projects?
You mean on the technical assistance fund side, I suppose, because we don't have dollars for implementation of projects. The budget we have is fairly limited it's renewed annually at this point, the budget for technical assistance fund grants, and the dollars are small. So as far as each transaction, so and it's a big country. So I think the answer is we would love to look at some of these on a case-by-case basis. We don't have a lot of capital to fund a scaled participation TA fund grant at this point. Whether that makes sense to try to mutually go together and try to do that, we should talk about.
Yeah, just to let people know, I mean, our technical assistance grants really just to support development cost funding through other sources. So projects that are likely to move ahead but wouldn't move ahead without some additional funding that's available. You know, we get at the most we pay for something like a energy service company or an engineering company to come in and take again a fairly high level view of what things look like and say, okay, these are what the likely economics are, these are the costs and benefits, this is what at a high level you could do with this property as far as how much solar you can put on, how much storage would make sense for the critical loads that you're looking to back up, and what the economics of all that look like. So that's really what we could provide. It's a nonprofit that has some donated Nissan Leafs, which is great. Doing a proof of concept workforce housing project. So EV to building, this is sometimes called vehicle to grid, is happening in some places, but it hasn't been widely explored yet. So they're looking for some sources of projects that are like this. Now, I just have to kind of go off the top of my head here. I know that there is a vehicle to grid project in California that's been, I think it's been underway for some years now. I think that it's with the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, SMUD. So if you go and look for them, I would just do a web search for them and look at EVs, vehicle to grid. I think you can find an example of a pilot project that's been done there. This is still a pretty new area. There are some questions as to whether the degradation that the batteries undergo is worth the benefit that you get from using the stored energy, or if it's just too much and people aren't going to be willing to use their vehicles that way. Now, if these are donated Leafs, then it might be the opportunity cost of doing that is fairly low. So it would make a lot of sense. And again, I know that that Second Life energy electric vehicle batteries are being used for a lot of stationary storage applications. They're being repurposed for this kind of thing. So that's a whole other ballgame where there are a lot of companies that are looking into using repurposed batteries that are no longer suitable for electric vehicles, but still have a lot of capacity left for stationary storage. So kind of a general question here asking about payback period. I assume this is just trying to ask about, what the payback period might be for a solar and storage project. That's a really, really wide range of possibilities there. To get a sense of what some of the project paybacks can look like, if you check out some of our resources in the economics section of the affordable housing side, I think I'm on the, no, I am on the affordable housing side. So if you look at the Resilience for Free report and you look at the Closing the California Clean Energy Divide, you get an idea of what some of the analysis that we did looked like and what the project paybacks for those would look like. It really depends on what the potential value streams are, and that's highly dependent on both where you are and what you're trying to do with the systems. So let me take a look here. I lost my questions. I think that we're about out of questions at this point. So I encourage anyone that has remaining questions, please feel free to reach out to myself, reach out to Rob. We're always happy to talk to people. Anyone developing a project, reach out to us, and we can certainly provide some high-level assistance, let you know what makes sense and what doesn't, where some resources might be that would be helpful to help you understand these more. And this is what we do. We're trying to get more of these projects developed, and we're trying to get more of them out there. So thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to kick it back over to Sam to close things out, and hope this was helpful, and that we hear from all of you in the future. So thank you.
Thanks, Seth, and thank you, Rob. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. There's some contact info on your screen and some links where you can find many of the resources that Seth and Rob talked about today, particularly the resilient-power.org web address there, which will take you to the Resilient Power website. I also want to let everyone know about an upcoming webinar that we have later in the month on the topic of energy storage. If that's of interest to you, which I imagine it might be if you tuned in for this whole webinar, that is going to be on April 27th, and we will be highlighting sort of the economic case for one of the energy storage projects that we helped take place. So that's, again, on April 27th. You can find more info about that on our website at the web address on the screen. And we'll have many more webinars throughout the month, so I encourage you to check back in with us and see what we've got going on. Thank you very much, everybody, and we will see you at the next one. Bye.